Before we dive into this story, remember, what you're about to hear isn't for the faint of heart. If you think you can handle it, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and let's step behind the walls of America's most feared prison, Pelican Bay. The sirens started before sunrise, a long metallic scream that ripped through the cold fog rolling off California's northern coast. Inside Pelican Bay State Prison, chaos was already unfolding. Guards sprinted across the yard as a body lay face down near the concrete wall, blood seeping into the cracks, spreading like dark ink. The inmate's name was Luis "Spider" Navarro, a high-ranking member of the Sureños gang, serving life without parole. His throat had been slit clean, almost surgical. No weapon found, no witnesses talking, just the eerie silence of a prison used to violence, but not this kind of precision. By 7 a.m., Detective Morgan Reeves arrived. She'd been working gang-related cases in Crescent City for years, but something about this killing didn't fit. The way the blood had pooled, the absence of a shiv, it was too clean, too calculated. She stared at the body, noting a small tattoo on Navarro's wrist, a pelican with one wing missing. "Get me a list of everyone who's had yard access in the last 24 hours. The correctional officer hesitated. "That's gonna be a long list." "Then start tutting it down, fast." The prison's security wing buzzed with tension. Pelican Bay wasn't like other prisons. It was built for total control. No bars, just solid doors and surveillance. Inmates were kept in windowless cells for 23 hours a day. Communication was nearly impossible, which meant if Navarro was killed, it had to be an inside job. The warden, James Hollister, a stern man with deep lines around his eyes, met Morgan in his office. "You think one of my officers did this?" "I think whoever did it had access, and that narrows it down to your staff or someone you've trusted too long." Hollister's jaw tightened. "You don't know what it's like in here, Detective. This place eats good men alive." As the investigation unfolded, Morgan found herself facing walls thicker than concrete, not just from the inmates, but from the very system that ran the prison. Files disappeared, surveillance footage from the night before came back corrupted. Guards swore they saw nothing. Then, she got an anonymous note slid under her hotel room door that night. "He wasn't the first. Check cell block D. Midnight transfers." The handwriting was shaky, but deliberate. The next morning, Morgan requested access to the transfer logs. The warden's secretary claimed they'd already been archived. Morgan knew what that meant. Gone. So she went straight to the source. Inmates. One of them, Eli Torres, a former enforcer for the Mexican Mafia, had been inside long enough to know how things worked. Spider was running a deal, but not drugs, not money. Something worse. Worse? Information. On the guards. On the system. He was planning to sell it.
Morgan leaned forward. "Sell it to who?" Eli smirked. "You're asking the wrong question, Detective. You should ask who gave it to him." That night, Morgan sat in her car outside Pelican Bay, watching the fog swallow the razor wire fences. She replayed Eli's words again and again. What kind of information could an inmate possibly have that was dangerous enough to kill for? Then, the call came through. Another body. This time, it wasn't an inmate. It was Officer Thomas Hale, found dead in his home, 40 miles south. No signs of forced entry. Same clean cut across the throat. And a single feather, white, pristine, placed on his chest. Morgan's blood ran cold. Navarro's tattoo, the pelican. She drove back to the prison, demanding answers. The warden met her at the gate, eyes hard as steel. "Detective, I told you to stay out of this. Someone's killing your men, Hollister. You really think I'm backing off now?" He didn't respond, just stared at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "You don't understand what you're digging into." But Morgan was done playing safe. She ordered a full lockdown on cell block D, where the note had led her. When she entered, the air felt heavier. The echo of boots on concrete sounded like whispers of buried secrets. In one of the cells, she noticed something odd, a patch of fresh paint on the wall. Different shade, too recent. She knocked. hollow. She ordered maintenance to strip it down. Beneath the plaster, they found a cavity, and inside, a stack of envelopes, dozens of them, each stamped with the Department of Corrections seal. Inside were reports, real, classified reports, about internal investigations, bribe records, and guard misconduct. Navarro had been collecting them, the information Eli mentioned, proof of a corruption ring that reached deep into Pelican Bay's administration. But one folder stood out, marked with a red sticker. She opened it, expecting another report. Instead, it was a photo. A photo of Officer Hale standing beside Warden Hollister, both smiling, both holding a briefcase, and in the background, Navarro. Morgan's hand shook. The dates didn't match. That photo was taken weeks before Navarro's death, which meant the warden wasn't just aware of Navarro, he'd been working with him. Before she could process it, the lights in the block flickered, then went out completely. Total darkness. She grabbed her flashlight, but it was too late. From somewhere in the shadows, a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have opened that wall." Then, the sound of boots. Coming closer.
The emergency lights flickered to life, bathing cell block D in a dim red glow. Detective Morgan Reeves froze, every instinct screaming at her to move, but her body wouldn't listen. The echo of boots on concrete was deliberate, slow, steady, and getting closer. "Who's there?" she shouted, flashlight trembling in her grip. No answer, just the faint hum of the ventilation system and the metallic groan of the old prison structure settling. She swung her light toward the end of the corridor, but the beam cut through nothing but dust. Then, a crash, a door slamming shut somewhere deeper in the block. Morgan's radio crackled. Static. Then a voice, distorted, barely audible. "Reeves, get out. Now!" The signal died. She sprinted toward the exit, but when she reached the security gate, the keypad was dead. Power failure, locked from the control tower. Someone had trapped her inside. She scanned the block again, breathing hard, and that's when she noticed it. A faint glimmer under the cell door at the far end. She pushed forward, flashlight sweeping over graffiti and rusted bars until she reached it. Inside, an inmate was standing perfectly still, facing the wall. "Turn around," she ordered. The man didn't move. His voice, when it came, was hoarse and calm. "You found the envelopes, didn't you?" Morgan's chest tightened. "Who are you?" The man slowly turned. His face was pale, marked with thin scars that mapped across his jaw like spiderwebs. "Name's Victor Lane. Used to work here." "You were a guard?" "Assistant warden," he corrected, stepping closer. "Until I learned what Hollister was doing." Morgan's pulse kicked. "You mean the corruption?" Victor shook his head. "Corruption's just a word they use when they can't describe evil. Hollister wasn't running a prison. He was running a business." He explained that years ago Hollister had started an underground trade. Not drugs, not weapons. Information. Inmates who cooperated in internal investigations or provided intel were quietly eliminated. The reports Morgan found were part of a cover-up network, forged and filtered to protect the people at the top. Navarro was supposed to deliver the files to someone on the outside, but when Hollister found out, he sent Hale to shut him up. Only Hale grew a conscience, tried to back out, and that's why he ended up dead, Morgan muttered. Victor nodded. "And now you're next." Before Morgan could respond, the red lights flickered again. A sharp buzz came from the intercom above them. Hollister's voice filled the block, calm and icy. "Detective Reeves, you shouldn't be here after hours. This is a restricted zone." Morgan looked up at the camera. "You killed them, didn't you? Navarro, Hale, they knew too much." A pause, then a quiet laugh. "You don't understand what keeps a place like this running. Control, Detective. It's all about control. Some secrets are necessary.
Morgan scanned for the nearest exit route. The secondary gate was mechanical. Manual override from the tower above. If she could get there, she could open it. "Victor, can you still access the upper levels?" she asked. He nodded. "There's a maintenance tunnel behind cell 14. It leads to the tower." Together, they pried open the panel and slipped into the narrow passageway. The air was thick with dust and mold. Pipes lined the ceiling, dripping condensation that echoed like slow water torture. Halfway through, they heard movement. 2 guards patrolling above. Voices echoed faintly. "Orders from the warden. No one leaves D Block tonight." "What about the detective?" "Tyler wants it handled." Victor clenched his jaw. He's cleaning house again. They crawled faster, emerging into the tower's lower chamber. From here, they could see the entire yard through the glass windows, floodlights cutting across the fog, illuminating figures moving like shadows. Morgan creeped toward the main console. Power indicators flashed red, overwritten commands. She started typing in the manual release code, but the system denied her access. Then she noticed something strange. On the side of the console was a USB drive labeled Project Pelican. Victor's face went pale. "That's it," he whispered. "That's what Navarro was smuggling out. The files." Morgan yanked it free, pocketed it, and started rebooting the system. But the monitor suddenly came alive. Hollister's face filled the screen, illuminated by the glow of his office. "You just don't know when to stop, do you? You think you can expose this? Every man who's tried is buried in unmarked dirt behind the north fence." Morgan glared at him. "Then I'll make sure you join them." She hit the emergency override. Sirens wailed as the cell doors below began unlocking one by one, every inmate in D Block suddenly free. Victor stared at her. "What did you do?" "Level the playing field." The tower trembled with the sound of alarms and shouting below. Morgan grabbed Victor's arm and pulled him to the elevator. But before they could move, a gunshot rang out. Glass shattered beside them. Hollister stood in the observation deck above, pistol aimed directly at Morgan. "You don't get it. This place needs fear. It's the only thing that keeps them from tearing the world apart." Morgan ducked behind a metal column as bullets ripped through the glass. She fired back, shattering lights. Sparks flew. Alarms screamed louder.
When her clip emptied, she lunged for the exit, but Hollister's voice followed her through the chaos.
"You think you're saving them, Detective? You're unleashing something you can't control."
Morgan didn't stop. She and Victor sprinted down the steel staircase as inmates poured into the yard below, shouting, running, freedom and fury colliding. Outside, floodlights spun wildly across the fog. The sound of chaos echoed through the concrete walls. Shouts, gunfire, sirens. They reached the outer gate just as the backup generators kicked in, locking it again. Morgan slammed her hand against the keypad. Dead. Victor looked around desperately. "There's another way out. Old transport tunnel under the west yard from the construction days. I can get us there." But before they could move, the radio on Morgan's belt crackled. A voice came through, broken, terrified. "Reeves, it's Sergeant Malone. We found something in the warden's office. It's a list. Your name's on it." Morgan froze. "What kind of list?" Malone's voice cracked with static. "Targets. Everyone who saw the files. Navarro, Hale, Lane." Morgan turned to Victor, but he was already gone. Only the echo of his footsteps remained, and on the console behind her, the screen flickered one last time. Hollister's voice, quiet and deliberate. "Detective Reeves? I didn't put Victor's name on that list." The yard burned with chaos. Floodlights sliced through the fog like white knives while sirens screamed into the black sky. Inmates were flooding every corridor, guards shouting orders that no one followed. Pelican Bay had turned into a battlefield, and in the middle of it, Detective Morgan Reeves was running for her life. She pushed through the smoke pouring from the control tower's shattered windows, heart pounding, lungs burning. Hollister's words echoed in her head. "I didn't put Victor's name on that list." Then who did? The moment she hit the outer corridor, she could hear it, the distant hum of the generators trying to reboot the prison's lockdown. She had minutes before the gates sealed again. She sprinted toward the west yard, the USB drive still burning in her pocket like a live charge. At the edge of the yard, shadows flickered. A figure was waiting, half hidden behind a concrete barrier.
Victor Lane. He stepped out holding a pistol, his expression unreadable in the flashing lights. "You were supposed to trust me, detective," he said quietly, "but you started digging too deep." Morgan raised her hand slightly, eyes locked on his. "You killed them. Navarro, Hale, it was you." He smiled faintly. "Not all of them. Some killed themselves with greed. But yes, Navarro found out too much. Hale tried to expose me to Hollister. I had to clean up the mess." Morgan's throat tightened. "You made it look like Hollister's operation." "Because it was his, at first. But he got sloppy. He let it become about money. I made it something more valuable, information as leverage. Politicians, judges, gang leaders, all filtered through Pelican Bay. I kept order by fear and silence." He stepped closer, gun aimed steady. "You should have stayed out of it, Reeves. You could have walked away with your badge and your life." Morgan stared at him, voice low and steady. "You really think you're in control? The moment I plugged that drive into the tower, it started uploading to the state's database. Every file, every name. You're done." For the first time, Victor's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. "You're bluffing. Try me." The standoff hung in the air like a blade. Then, a distant explosion shook the ground. The east wall had collapsed. Dozens of inmates poured through the breach, roaring like a storm. Victor turned his head for half a second, just enough time. Morgan lunged. The gun went off, grazing her arm as she slammed into him. The two tumbled into the dirt, fighting for control of the weapon. He was stronger, but she was desperate. She drove her knee into his ribs, twisted his wrist, and the pistol clattered away. Victor grabbed her by the collar, dragging her toward the edge of the yard. "You think you can expose me? You'll never leave this place alive." Morgan reached for the nearest thing she could grab, a broken piece of rebar. She swung hard. It connected with his shoulder, sending him staggering back. He stumbled against the floodlight post, the glare washing over his blood-smeared face. "You don't get it. They need people like me. You kill me, someone worse takes my place." Morgan hesitated, chest heaving. "Then maybe that's a risk worth taking." Before Victor could move again, a deafening crack split the air. A sniper shot, fired from the tower. The bullet hit Victor square in the chest. He dropped instantly, collapsing into the mud. Morgan spun around, eyes darting upward. In the tower's silhouette, she saw him, Warden Hollister, rifle still smoking. She ran toward the dying man. Victor's eyes were fading, but his voice was still sharp. "You think you won? You're just another piece on his board. He'll bury this like he buried the rest."
His last breath came out in a whisper. "The system protects itself." Then he was gone. Morgan stood in the chaos, trembling. Floodlights flickered, alarms screamed. She turned toward the tower, but Hollister had vanished. Only the echo of the gunshot remained. By dawn, the prison was under federal lockdown. SWAT teams secured the perimeter. Medics moved through the carnage. Over 30 inmates injured, 5 dead, and 1 missing, Warden Hollister. Morgan sat on the back of an ambulance, arm bandaged, eyes hollow. The USB drive had survived, though cracked from the fight. The files were still uploading when the feds arrived. They contained years of evidence, extortion, cover-ups, secret inmate experiments, and offshore accounts linked to multiple officials. But the deeper the investigators went, the more data they claimed was classified. Within a week, the case was sealed. The media called it a containment breach, nothing more. Morgan knew better. She resigned 2 days later, packed up her things, left Crescent City behind. But even on the road, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. 3 weeks later, she got a small, unmarked envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It showed a man sitting in a hospital bed, tubes in his arm, his face bandaged but unmistakable, Warden Hollister. On the back of the photo, one sentence was scrawled in ink: Pelican Bay is under new management. Morgan stared at it for a long time before burning it in her sink. The flames curled the paper, turning the words to ash. Outside, the wind howled, the same sound she remembered from that night in D Block. And in the distance, through the static of her police radio that she hadn't turned off in weeks, a voice whispered, "Control never dies. It just changes hands." She closed her eyes. The world outside might never know the truth, but she did, and it would haunt her forever. If you thought this story was dark, her voice echoed as if speaking to the unseen audience, you're not ready for what comes next. Hit subscribe, and remember, some prisons don't need walls to trap you.